Mr. Singleton is a Senior Director for China and a Senior Fellow at the Nonpartisan Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he focuses on great power competition with Beijing. A former U.S. diplomat with nearly 2 decades of service, he has worked extensively on China, North Korea, and the Indo-Pacific security. He also lectures at Stanford University on Chinese grand strategy. With that, Mr. Singleton, the floor is yours.
Chairman Ricketts, Ranking Member Coons, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify. I'm pleased to offer policy insights from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a nonpartisan research institute where I serve as a senior fellow. Today, China is preparing for a conflict it hopes never to fight by slowly engineering the conditions for Taiwan's subjugation. This is not a distant or hypothetical problem. It's happening now. Beijing's ICAD playbook is calibrated to be incremental and ambiguous, carefully designed to avoid tripping U.S. red lines while steadily degrading Taiwan's confidence in its future. In China's calculus, Taiwan must eventually conclude that resistance is futile, that capitulation, not confrontation, is the only rational choice. Beijing interprets vulnerabilities not only in Taiwan's defenses, but also in U.S. and allied responses as validation of its approach. To date, sustained coercion below the threshold of war has not triggered decisive action. Instead, it has generated debate, delay, and uneven responses rather than unified pushback. This perception emboldens Beijing, which views ambiguity and hesitation among democracies as exploitable gaps in deterrence, gaps that reinforce Beijing's conviction that time favors its strategy. One challenge is that deterrence, as traditionally understood, does not map cleanly on the problem China has created. Deterrence by denial, building enough military power to block an invasion, and deterrence by punishment, threatening retaliatory costs, both falter when the contest unfolds in the gray zone. Equally critical is resilience, Taiwan's ability to withstand and bounce back from sustained pressure without losing confidence in its future or faith in U.S. support. Our job is to flip China's logic, proving that Taiwan's society, economy, and partners can outlast coercion, that Taipei can get back up after each shove, and that Beijing gains nothing from dragging out the contest. But increasingly, gray zone coercion is no longer a low-risk strategy. The more ships and planes Beijing surges around Taiwan, the higher likelihood there is for an accident, collision, or exchange of fire. What looks like slow-motion strangulation could just as easily become a sudden shock, a crisis that neither side intended, but both must confront. While Beijing has many avenues of coercion, one vulnerability stands out above all others: energy. Taiwan imports nearly all of its primary energy, and about half of its electricity now comes from liquefied natural gas. Its storage depth is thin, barely 10 days for LNG, meaning even temporary disruptions could cascade quickly into political and social pressure. To stress test these risks, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies conducted a series of energy quarantine tabletop exercises in Taipei with Taiwanese officials and experts, and in Europe and in the US with public and private stakeholders. The findings were sobering. The exercises revealed how Beijing could exploit Taiwan's dependence by combining limited interdictions at sea, cyber-enabled disruption of energy infrastructure, and political disinformation, squeezing confidence without firing a shot. The lesson is clear. Energy is not just a technical vulnerability, it's Taiwan's Achilles heel. So what should we do? Congress has a critical role in closing the deterrence gap. 3 priorities stand out. First, help harden Taiwan's resilience. That means supporting efforts to diversify energy imports, strengthen cyber defenses around critical infrastructure, and build redundancy into Taiwan's power grid, ports, and defense supply chains. These are practical steps that make it harder for Beijing to exploit choke points, and they buy time in a crisis. Second, strengthen allied and private sector signaling. Beijing counts on insurers, shippers, and markets to walk away at the first hint of risk, cutting off Taiwan's lifelines through commercial caution rather than open confrontation. Congress can press the administration to coordinate with allies on maritime insurance backstops and reflagging options, so trade with Taiwan continues even under pressure. Third, make clear that coercion will carry costs. Congress can advance sanctions tools that target Chinese entities complicit in quarantine operations or cyber-enabled disruption. This doesn't mean threatening war. It means ensuring Beijing understands that coercion against Taiwan will trigger coordinated countermeasures. The goal is simple: to ensure Beijing concludes that coercion, whether slow-motion strangulation or sudden shock, will fail. That's how we keep the peace, and that's why this committee's leadership is so essential. On behalf of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, I thank you again for inviting me to testify today.